It's so urgent that we meet these targets, and we're
Yeah.
just not moving fast enough. And I think that's where it's exciting to bring businesses in. Businesses are more nimble. I think that they're able to take risks a little bit easier. I think that they also lead by example. There's a real role that
Abs-
businesses can play and need to play to advance our whole global effort toward real sustainability.
Hello and welcome back to Land, Ocean and Business Podcast. I'm your host, Isabella, and I'm thrilled to bring you today's session. It's our second session of the podcast, and I'm super excited because it's all about rewilding, conservation, and the crucial role of businesses in these efforts. I'm incredibly excited to introduce to you our special guest of today, Carrie Hutchison. Carrie is a director of marketing and brand at Rewild, an environmental organization that we are working with and that is making significant strides in conservation. Rewild was co-founded by a group of scientists alongside the renowned actor and environmentalist Leonardo DiCaprio. With more than 35 years of combined conservation effort, Rewild is committed to impacting as many as possible stakeholders in the fight towards rewilding our planet. So our conversation today will be covering fascinating topics from rewilding and tree planting, but also to the broader implications of conservation efforts. We'll also be exploring the intersection of businesses and environmental stewardship and their role in this sustainability wave that is taking over the business world and consumers at the same time. Of course, I'm also super excited to go and dive deeper at the personal level with Carrie, learn more about her sustainability habits, what she's doing, and her passion about all things sustainability. So, with this said, Carrie, welcome to the Land, Ocean, and Business podcast. We're super
Thank
happy
you,
to have you
Isabella. I'm
here.
so glad to be here.
Of course, no, I'm really excited. You're the first environmental organization that we are talking to, and I'm super, super happy that you are the first guest for the podcast. So, Carrie, I think that before starting, I would love to know a bit more about you. Tell us about yourself and how you became so passionate about sustainability and
Sure.
nonprofits.
So I am based in the Washington, D.C. area. I've lived here for about 20 years. And after I got my master's degree in marketing, I found that there was a mission. I have a mission based heart. I was much more drawn to working for
Love
nonprofits than businesses, although I really love taking some of the lessons that businesses have taught us about succeeding to the nonprofit space. So I started out working for a nonprofit in the impact investing space. I stayed involved in that arena for a long time. It's a really important field, and I still have very close friends that are working in it. And then from there, worked for
Yeah.
National Geographic for several years, and I would say that's where I really learned a ton about the power of visual storytelling and design and film and exploration and inspiration and the power of storytelling. That was an incredible experience, and I'm very grateful for those years there. Then I consulted for a while with a lot of different nonprofits, but the environment was always something that was closest to my heart. I grew up outdoors and went camping and many summers at
That's
the
amazing.
beach and loved the ocean. So to be able to bring all of these together into my personal and professional world right now is really, I feel very lucky.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm super happy that sustainability and in the environment has been such a big
Me too.
part of your life since many years back. Carrie, tell us a bit about Rewild and also what is the meaning of rewilding. This is something that really calls my attention.
Sure. So Rewild launched in 2021. We were formerly Global Wildlife Conservation, which was very focused on biodiversity. We still are, but we wanted to get out of the, I call it the acronym soup of nonprofits, lots of acronyms and technical names. And we settled on the word rewild because it has great energy and it's an action. And people are very drawn to that and they like the concept. And so do we.
Hmm.
So we have been expanding a lot, working with a lot of businesses. But our biggest partnership base is the partners that we work with around the world, the conservation groups. And these are anywhere from small local groups to larger organizations that are very familiar with the regions that they work in, very familiar with the species and the culture, because community and culture
Hmm.
and people power is everything when it comes to conservation. So we work with 500 partners in nearly 90 countries around the world. We're very
Yeah, that's
partner
crazy.
led. We could not do what we do without all of the partners that we work with. So we do a lot of rewilding projects. Rewilding, at its very basic definition, is returning something to its natural state. But that's just a part of what we do. Often it's more effective to protect a place from being degraded than to have to restore it later on, especially with old growth forests. It's not just about trees, it's habitats for species, it's water sources that we as people rely on. It's all interconnected, and that's a big part of what we talk about. Biodiversity is the state of balance of an interconnected system. Sustainability is reducing harm, and rewilding is an action for bringing those places back to the biodiversity that should be there. So I think those terms get tossed around a lot, but rewilding is just a piece of what we do. A lot of what we do involves helping people do the conservation work, supporting rangers, supporting indigenous groups, protecting places before they're destroyed, and also reintroducing key species to ecosystems that maybe where they've gone locally extinct or their numbers are dwindling. So there's a lot of elements to what we do as an organization. Rewild is probably the most fun term of them all, but just a part of what we do.
I love that term. And you did mention something super important here, that there are so many words that are tossed around all the time in reports, in businesses, in NGOs, governments. And at the end, for me at least, I find the word sustainability very conflicting. What is sustainability? What does it entail? There are so many branches to it, right? And when you just say we are sustainable, what does that mean? So for me, this is something that I'm constantly thinking about and always trying to give more attention to, also for our communication as a company. Something that you mention a lot is your work with people, and I know that you are a super people focused NGO. And I was checking your website and I saw this very big sentence, which was protect the wild and restore the rest. And I think this was a super strong sentence for me that I saw, because at the end, some things don't need to be restored, but protected, and the other way around. So I think that this is super important. Wild is wild, and that's it. So the role that we should do is just take care of it, protect it, and not mess up with it as we have done, unfortunately, the last 50, 80, 100 years. Carrie, I know that, as I was mentioning, you work super closely with stakeholders. This can be indigenous communities. I'm not sure if governments as well, rangers. So I just wanted to ask you a bit more about the role that each of them have in
Yeah,
rewilding.
one of the ways I like to talk about rewild, and I think is very accurate, is that I really see rewild as the great connector. So we're not a giant organization. We're actually only around 75 people, but because we work, I think of us as this little hub, and we have connection points to all of these different people from different sectors, from different parts of the world. To answer your question, we do work with governments. Governments are very important players, especially when it comes to designating an area permanently protected. We do quite a bit of work behind the scenes and publicly, but governments are very important partners. Governments also have a lot of bureaucracy and tend to not always move as quickly as they need to, especially now. It's so urgent that we meet these targets, and we're just not moving fast enough. And I think that's where it's exciting to bring businesses in. Businesses are more nimble. I think that they're able to take risks a little bit easier. I think that they also lead by example. There's a real role that businesses can play and need to play to advance our whole global effort toward real sustainability. Like I said, there's sustainability I really see as reducing or eliminating harm in the business cycle or in our daily lives. But there is a role, and a lot of businesses are paying attention now to biodiversity and supporting it directly. So one of the companies that I've worked with for a couple of years now, their wonderful partner is YSL Beauty, based out of Paris, and they have done a lot of work to understand their biodiversity footprint. They've really done a lot of work to source their ingredients sustainably. They take a lot of care to make sure that the workers and the surrounding communities are not harmed by their efforts. And they came to us and said, we want to take it a step further and we want to invest directly in biodiversity projects. So they started in areas where they source ingredients, so Madagascar and Haiti. So they are going above and beyond sustainability and directly investing to protect biodiversity in those areas. And they've now expanded to Canada, and they're announcing some new projects coming up through us soon. So we're working with them to protect and restore 100,000 hectares by 2030. And we're well on our way to that goal.
Oh, that's beautiful. Carrie, I just have one question that immediately popped in my head. Did you mention biodiversity
Yes.
footprint?
Yes.
Because I've never heard this term before, so I'm super curious about what it means. Carbon footprint seems to be the big word right now, but I think that now that you mentioned biodiversity footprint is something I've never
Yeah.
heard before. And I know that maybe some listeners would also like to know a bit more about the
Yeah.
meaning
So
of
I
it.
think it's understanding kind of land use, the effect that you're having on land use, water sources in the area, species in the area. So it's taking it a step further. It's probably very similar to what sustainability efforts are doing, but to really understand beyond just, okay, here's the area where we're working, they're looking beyond it. What is happening to the place next door? Are species being affected by anything that's going downstream?
Mm.
So they were really thoughtful in how they looked at that with more of a biodiversity lens than just, are we causing harm? So it was great to work with a partner who had done so much homework, and they worked with a third party to do that. I think that lends a lot of credibility.
Wow.
And often companies don't have that expertise on staff. So working with a third party and sharing
Yeah.
that data is really important.
Absolutely. No, I fully agree. And I think for businesses, it's so important for them to jump in the right of sustainability. Either you catch it or you miss it, and then it's your consumers, your customers telling you, hey, what's happening? What is going on here? There's a lot of pressure, not just from governments, but also for consumers. So it's something that businesses really need to take more and more into account. It is quite complicated, and it's what I was discussing in another podcast episode, how hard it can be for businesses to implement sustainability, mainly because it can be very expensive. I say it can be because it can also not be that expensive depending on which angle you take it. As I was saying, sustainability is
Yeah.
such a
And you
huge
mentioned
word.
customer
Um,
pressure, definitely accurate and true. But I also think that companies have a great opportunity to share biodiversity and environmental messages because they are often such great marketers,
yeah,
and they are trendsetters and they influence popular culture. So they can also use their platforms to inspire, educate, and it can go both ways. So there's consumer pressure on companies, but there also could be a great educational and inspirational moment created by their outreach and platform efforts as well.
yeah. No, you're completely right. I fully agree. Especially the influence. This is such a big word. Like there is such a big
Brands are really
influence
influential.
from businesses. Yeah, totally. They're super influential in society, in norms, in people's behavior, and they have such a big role to play here. And of course, you have the consumer, the individual person who can take the daily actions, which we will discuss later on. But at the end of the day, the businesses have such a huge role to play in creating a change of mindset for the people, how to consume, how to live their lives, how to behave. And I think that this is such a big opportunity, as you say, for businesses to take and influence positively
Yeah.
to the consumers. Carrie, going back a bit to Rewild, because I still have one big question. Which is your favorite project that Rewild is currently working on?
Oh, that's a hard one. There are so many. I think one of my favorite projects that we've worked on that had multiple layers across the organization last year is called Rewild Your Fridge. Since
Ah, I saw something.
Yeah, so since
Yeah.
I've started working specifically with Rewild, I've learned a lot about the effect of mainly animal agriculture on biodiversity. The Amazon is being cleared to raise cattle. The Colorado River is being drained to grow feed for cattle. And people don't realize this. When you talk about the environmental reduction, they think about cows burping and farting and sure methane is part of it, but it's really the land use and the land clearing that's a huge issue. And it's not talked about enough. It's starting to be talked about a lot more. And I'm so glad because the people just don't know all of the environmental harms that
Yeah.
especially animal agriculture has wildlife, on biodiversity, and on our own health.
Mm.
So we actually in a documentary called Patrol that followed indigenous people in Nicaragua whose land was being destroyed and mowed down to raise cattle, and that beef is ending up in US supermarkets, and people just don't know. They don't know where their food
Yeah.
comes from. They don't know that it's causing not just environmental harm, but harm to people. So we
Yeah.
took this documentary to film festivals, and it won a bunch of awards. It really raised awareness. We did a New York debut of it at Climate Week, and there was very positive reception. I want to help. I want to do something different. I want to see change. And it's just a new view on food. So there are people who have advocated for plant-based diets for a long time, but I don't think that the general public really makes that connection between biodiversity loss and food.
And this is what I was thinking along the way. I think modern society has given us so much, but one of the big things it has taken from us is the
Yes.
connection to nature. The only thing in the grocery stores is a barcode on top of a raw piece of meat,
Yeah.
raw piece of chicken, raw piece of fish. I think that throughout the decades, decade after decade, generation after generation, there is such a lack of awareness about where the food on your
Mm-hmm.
plate is coming from. So I think that this documentary that you're doing, or that you collaborated with, is such a beautiful initiative because people just don't know. We are so stuck in the laptops, in the
Yeah.
digital world, in the fast-paced living. Okay, I need to do groceries 1 hour. I buy 10 pieces of meat for all my family, 5 pieces of chicken, 10 pieces of fish. But where is it coming from? And I think this is such a pity at the end because, as you mentioned, things like in the Brazilian Amazon, at least, this is something that I did a huge research on what was happening under Bolsonaro when he was the president in Brazil, what was going on in the Brazilian Amazon, also with the indigenous communities, the amount of
Right.
displacement there has been for them. We are losing so much culture, so much knowledge, and it's a pity to see this happening not just in the Amazon, but also things like in the Colorado River. I had no idea, and there is also so much. I'm guessing that there was or is so much biodiversity, and now it's
Yeah.
all being lost.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's easy to focus on what's wrong. I think people need to know that
mm.
first because they're not going to look for solutions if they don't understand the problem.
Yeah,
But there's also a lot of
absolutely.
hope, and it's amazing how much of a difference you can make just by shifting some of your habits. So obviously if we all became plant-based, it would be a huge help for biodiversity. I think that will take time. I think that
So,
talking about cultural norms, it's just not how a lot of people grew up. It's not what they're used to. It's not the norm at restaurants. It's not the norm at grocery stores. So we definitely have a lot of systems that would need to shift to accommodate that. And that's what's exciting to work on. We have several pilot projects that we're working to get funded in South America, where we're working with farmers to switch away from cattle ranching to more sustainable crops like acai, and finding that they make more money, it's better for their livelihoods, it's better for the planet. There are solutions that are win and we just have to prove that they can scale, that they are doable, that they can be popular, because that's a big problem with working with
yeah.
governments and politicians is they answer to the people, right? So they also have to be solutions that work across multiple levels, from an economic perspective to an environmental perspective to a cultural perspective. But we do have exciting pilot projects that we're embarking on, and that's what I'm hoping to feature and raise money for in the next phase of Rewild Your Fridge, which we are hoping to launch later this year.
Oh, that's so exciting. I would love to hear more about this Rewild, your fridge initiative. I was also seeing that Rewild, your campus, you have such amazing projects going on. Carrie, you mentioned something that really struck me, and it's about how everything can be a win, but it also requires a
Mm-hmm.
lot of nudging, especially for people. I think for business, but especially for people. I'm thinking, for example, I was living in the Netherlands for 6 years, and there you have a huge area of vegan and vegetarian options. But then I moved to Rome, and here in Rome, you have a tiny space for vegetarian vegan because it's all about the culture, right? So, how can we create a society that is more aware? How can we start educating slowly? And I think that this is the tricky part, but I do think it's possible. I think it will never be possible for all society to go vegan. This is really hard because even if, for example, I am a vegan, but I'm traveling 20 times a year, 30 times a year, it doesn't really compensate. It, as I say, sustainability has so many different branches. So it's just about taking the steps that you can. And I think that this creates a perfect bridge for my next question. And it's about you and your personal lifestyle and how you are adding your little
Yeah.
brain.
Like I said, Rewild has had a huge effect on me. We are a plant based organization. So anytime we have any kind of gathering or fundraiser or even a staff or team retreat, we are only plant based. And several people on the staff are plant based 100% of the time. Learning all of this and knowing what I know, it's really changed my own personal habits. And I've gotten my family to slowly come along with me. Some were more open to it than others. But now I would say, compared to how we ate 5 years ago, it's very different. And I've also, like you said, like that connection to nature, I've started to grow my own food. So my husband built me a standing bed in the backyard, and we've had this garden for the last couple of years. And it's such a delight to go out and gather some Swiss chard and chop it up and saute it for dinner, fresh cucumbers. So that connection is, like you said, lost in a lot of ways, but I feel like people are curious and starting it again. And it's also made me just more aware of all the plants and animals in my area. So there's a free app that you can download called Seek, and it uses AI and tells you, I use it on plants all the time. Is this plant supposed to be here? Is it a native plant or is it an invasive species? So slowly I've also started to change the vegetation in my yard. We're reducing areas that we mow because mowing is not great for pollinators and animals in the area. So just getting curious about what's around you. We have a lot of people that write to us on our social media channels or our general inbox, and they're like, I love what you're doing in Madagascar or the Galapagos or the Amazon, but what about where I live? So I would say there is nature still left. We still have it. So get out into it, learn about it, enjoy it. Try adopting a plant, grow some of your own food. I have some herbs started. I don't think you can see them, but I just started some indoor herbs because it's too cold outside, but I'm hoping to get them out there once it's warm enough. So I think that there's a lot that we can do as individuals. Food is actually the most impactful thing that you can change in your personal life to really support biodiversity and the environment. Number one is food, but also voting, donating, and volunteering.
Yeah.
Actually, I've done several like invasive weed pullings at the creek nearby. It's a lot of fun. And I think we also need to take care of each other. The pandemic kind of pulled us apart a bit, and I feel like there's still a lot of isolation. And if we're going to tackle big global problems, we need to come back together again and care about each other, because just like biodiversity is all interconnected, we're all interconnected, and we need biodiversity. A healthy ecosystem is the best protection against climate change and global warming and pollution and pandemics. All of these things are happening because of a heating planet.
Yeah. Carrie, thank you so much for sharing. I love the little garden. I hope to be receiving some photos of that, because I really love these small things that you can do that have a beautiful impact, not just for the planet, but also for you, right? Like it's a moment for yourself. Exactly, absolutely. I have as well here some rosemary, some basil growing, and I'm super, super happy all the time for cooking, just to look at it, just to see it grow. It's such a beautiful and happy moment, and it can sound super hippie and all. But I really love it. But at the end of the day, it is about taking the small steps, creating awareness, and as you say, taking care of each other. I think that even before the pandemic, we were already quite isolated. The pandemic, of course, enhanced that times 10. And unfortunately, we live in a very divided world. Some areas of the world are extremely collective, others are extremely individual. So it's going back to the village, right? Where are we coming from? Where were our ancestors coming from? How did they live? They were living together as community, and they were not experiencing all of this mess that we're experiencing right now. But to close things on a higher note, I think it's amazing what you're doing, Carrie, and what Rewild is doing. Tell us, how can people find you, or how can they find Rewild? Where can they follow you at
Yep, so our
Rewild?
website is rewild.org, and we are at Rewild on most social channels. We're on Instagram, what's it called? Not Twitter anymore. X, Facebook,
X.
and really growing a lot on LinkedIn as well as TikTok. So you can find us in any of those places.
Oh, amazing.
And thanks for having me.
Amazing. Carrie, thank you so much for today's talk. It was super fun to hear all about your experience in sustainability, but also with
Thank
Rewild.
you. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Of course. Thank you so much for tuning into Land, Oceans, and Business today. You can find a summary of the episode in the show notes. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we would love to hear from you. Leave us a comment or a review, and don't forget to follow us. If you're looking for more, join our community and follow us on LinkedIn to keep track of our eco adventures. Until next time, keep on thinking green.